You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku. I appreciate you guys taking a listen. I also appreciate all of you who share our content, like and comment on our podcast. You are much appreciated. Thank you very much. Before I go into today's topic, I do want to give my customary free business shout out. Once again, it's only one business that I'm really getting to shout out. I will shout them out today, and I just want to say to you guys that if you have a Black business out there that you want to have more visibility, you want to get more Black support, you want to be able to circulate more Black dollars and into the community and through your business, please reach out to us. Reach out to us on all our social media. Reach out to us via email by emailing us at bitter.medicine.podcast@gmail.com, and we will have no problems giving you a free business shout out. So once again, today's free business shout out is for the Stephanie Renee Salon, located at 1614 West Main Street in Kalamazoo, Michigan, zip code 49006. If you want to reach Stephanie Renee Salon, you can call them at 269-459-6535. That's 269-459-6535. They're natural hair care products type of store. So again, that's Stephanie Renee's Salon. Reach out to them today. Now to today's topic. Today's topic, I want to talk about the importance of think tanks in the Black community. The importance of think tanks in the Black community. And as it stands, the Bitter Medicine Podcast has its own think tank as a WhatsApp group. We do it remotely. And we want to have more Black folks from various walks of life who have the knowledge and who have the compassion for their community. We would like you to join, men, women, etc. We want you to join. We want you to lend your voices, lend your ideas, because really in the world, that's what's most important, is making ideas something that comes to life in the physical form. I want to play a clip for you. This is Dr. Claud Anderson. I've played a version of this clip before on a previous podcast, but I want to play this clip for you today as a setup to the conversation of why we need think tanks. I want you to listen to Dr. Anderson here. All right, take a listen.
They don't have trust. They don't trust each other. You can't trust each other if you don't have a community. A community comes first. Once you get a community and you get to know people, then you move up to the next level. You trust them. Once you learn how to trust people, then you move up to the third level. You begin to cooperate with them. And once you learn how to cooperate with them, then you get to the fourth level. You start holding them accountable for what they're doing wrong. The same thing in business. In business, if you're building a business operation, and competitiveness and powernomics is a 5-story building. The first thing you all should be doing, as I said, get you some institutions like the Chamber and started teaching, acquiring wealth and power through operating businesses. If you build an economy, that's a 5-story building. The first floor must always be economics. Always build an economy before you do everything else. The first floor is the economy. The second floor is politics. The third floor is the court and police departments, the enforcement system. The fourth floor is the media. The fifth floor is schools. Now, again, you've been bamboozled on that because they keep telling you that if you go send black folks to school, go jump to the 5th floor and try to come back down. Education can't do nothing. Education is just a tool. You start with your economy. Once you build an economy, a viable, competitive economy, by making your money circulate 8 to 12 times, you take that money and you move to the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor is your politicians. Don't worry about vote. You don't have to vote. People that got money, whether it's organized crime or wealthy people, they don't have to vote. You take your money on the 1st floor and you buy every politician on the 2nd floor. And if you can't buy them, you rent or lease them. And once you rent or lease those politicians or buy them on the 2nd floor, you hold them accountable to go to the 3rd floor. And you stop the police from shooting and killing black folk all the time. And come up with new codes of conduct. Then once you get to the 3rd floor and get the police and court system straight, because you can now effectuate it, then you go to the 4th floor. The 4th floor means media. You cannot own television stations, radio stations, and daily newspapers if you don't have an economy. I hear black folk crying all the time. I have 2 radio stations. I used to have 4. You cannot have a media operation unless you have an economy. Who's going to buy your time, your ads? You got to have an economy to buy the time. And so you got to. Right now we have 12,000 radio stations in the United States. We got about 12,000 cable systems, 5,000 daily newspapers, 5,000 TV stations. Black folk own 35 thousandths of 1%. You can't even communicate. You can't communicate, you can't organize. You can't get communication because you don't have an economy. And once you get enough money, you put your medium up at the 4th floor. Then lastly, you tell the 5th floor, which is a school system, say, here's what we want. We don't want any more black basketball players and football players. Every black right now, a successful black, has got some kind of an illicit relationship with a ball. He's either running with a tennis ball, basketball, golf ball, football, setting on jokes, telling jokes, pretending he's having a ball. Just get away from that. And say from now on, you try to raise kids that can produce something. The producers will be the people survive. Right now, black folk are 0 producers and 100% consumers. You're going to get totally wiped out in this country and wiped off the face of the earth under globalization if you don't learn how to produce vertically. You produce something at the bottom level, then you go up and you have other blacks coming over you. Like I'm producing fish, 1 million pounds of fish a year, I want blacks to come in and warehouse, wholesale, distributor, then retail. I want to see some black lobster restaurants in the country. And you build, and I got about 2 more minutes I got. Now, and you build these vertical orders based on your competitive advantages. Build your businesses where you have a competitive advantage. What are your competitive advantages, black folk? Always build your business where you dominate in population or you dominate in spending patterns. I built the seafood factories. Why? Because blacks eat 3 to 4 times more seafood than whites, and you spend $9 for every $1 whites spend. You should be controlling the seafood industry. Do the same thing with leather. You do the same thing with your hair. Right now, blacks are the only people got a certain quality of hair, and yet the Koreans are controlling black hair care in America. And once you build these businesses, like the difference between Detroit and Chinatown, you got it in Chinatown in New York. In Chinatown, New York, they got about a little less than 300,000 Chinese there. And again, in Detroit, you had almost 1 million blacks. I looked at the two and compared them. In Chinatown, they had 35 banks, 35 Asian banks. In Detroit, they got 2 black banks, and that's owned by the same one. How is it that almost 1 million people don't have 2 banks and 300,000 will have 35 banks? I looked at the number of restaurants. The Asians had almost 400-something restaurants in New York. Black folk in Detroit had 3. I looked at and I said, how do these Asians producing so well and have so much? And Asians have the highest median family income in America. Here's what they do in conclusion. They build around their advantage. What is it that Asians eat the most of? They eat noodles. I went and found something like about 100 and some noodle factories in New York where they produce their own noodles. Now, once they produce the noodles, what do you put on the noodles? They put a sauce on the noodles. I found about another 60 or 70 companies that produce the sauce to go on the noodles. And I said, what else they producing? Then when I found that they had, I don't know how many, 35 or 40 companies that make the little fortune cookies. They take care of their own people. That's why you'll never see Asians, Arabs, Hispanic, or American Indians out marching for integration or for social civil rights. They don't do it. They build businesses. I love you all. Take care.
There you have it. I want to break this down a little bit because in an indirect way, what Dr. Claud Anderson was talking about there in his 5 levels to control, what it alludes to and doesn't address directly is the need for think tanks. And I'm going to break down what think tanks are right after I replay this little portion of what Dr. Anderson had to say.
They don't have trust. They don't trust each other. You can't trust each other if you don't have a community. A community comes first. Once you get a community and you get to know people, then you move up to the next level. You trust them. Once you learn how to trust people, then you move up to the 3rd level. You begin to cooperate with them. And once you learn how to cooperate with them, then you get to the 4th level. You start holding them accountable.
And there it is. Community. You move up to trust. You move up to accountability. That first part, and in fact, all 3 of those things come together when you talk about think tanks. A think tank is essentially a community of social engineers, or what some people call idea brokers. Think tanks are basically where you take a community of social engineers, influencers, idea brokers with evidence-based resources, who have evidence-based discussions, who then mobilize their expertise and lead to influencing policy making or influencing change. We severely lack think tanks in the black community. Where do we have the social engineers together, by the way? Where do we have the idea brokers together? Where do we have a mobilizing of these expertise, right? Your artisans, your scientists, your engineers, your politicians, your business people, your teachers, your educators. Where do we have these groups where they mobilize their expertise as a community and put in work that leads to influencing policy changes? You don't really see it. And in white society, as a part of their warfare against you, they have think tanks all day. And their think tanks are discussing social engineering or idea brokering or policy making, however which way you want to look at it. They're talking about all sorts of things that deal with you and deal with how to disadvantage you when it comes to those topics. A lot of white society's think tanks cover topics like poverty, inequality, disease, armed conflict, crime, education. But do you think in any one of those 6 things I mentioned, do you think they're talking about that in respect to you and your children? You and your people? No. They're talking about how to deal with white poverty when they talk about poverty. They're talking about how to deal with white inequality or perceived white inequality, because that's really what the alt-right and all this stuff is about. Protecting whiteness because they feel that they're at war and this, that, and the other. When they talk about disease, are they talking about your diseases or diseases that affect them the most, or those that affect them differently? When they talk about armed conflict, they're thinking about how to engage you and how to be able to prevent you from engaging them back. how to keep the war against you one-sided. Same thing with the disease. How do we keep that disease spreading in their communities and not ours? When they talk about crime, they're talking about how to prevent the white-on-white crime from increasing and how to channel that energy into the warfare against you, the armed conflict against you. When they talk about education, they're talking about promoting white European history. They're not talking about making it inclusive. And like Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, we have no friends as black people. We have no friends. So stop thinking that white folks are going to think about you when they're making decisions. They're not doing that. And for those of you listening to this show, you probably know this already. What's so difficult for me at times is I think about some of our people who walk around with their head in the bubble, who are not thinking about the choices that are being made for them. It never dawns on them. So for those of us who are more knowledgeable, who are more aware, more conscious, we have to begin sitting down and having these conversations ourselves, for ourselves. We have to have those FUBU talks, for us, by us talks. So Dr. Claud Anderson goes on to talk about his 5 levels to control, and I agree with Dr. Claud Anderson. I especially agree with the fact that at the top is the education thing. In our think tank, the Bitter Medicine podcast think tank on WhatsApp, we started off talking about education. Education seemed to be the thing that everyone kind of gravitated to when we were having, good dialogue about it. And I would like to challenge the group. You don't have to wait for me to do it, but let's talk about education. But also, let's keep in mind that there's some steps before we get up to education that we need to deal with. We can't, as Dr. Claud Anderson pointed out, we can't just jump up to the top level and skip everything else. But we need to have these think tanks. We need our intelligent, our knowledgeable, our aware. We need those people to be involved. Because the thing about a think tank is this. A think tank allows you to be in a position to take advantage of opportunities when they arise. You know the old saying, you don't have to get ready if you stay ready? That's what a think tank does. A think tank sits down and discusses all aspects of black living and black life. So when the opportunities come to back that politician who, we think is on code or what have you, or when it comes time to back some type of business development in our community, we're ready. We're ready to go. And we're not ready off of some anecdotal evidence. We're ready off of real evidence. Real evidence that our people researched and studied about our people. So when we work in these think tanks, and again, the Bitter Medicine podcast has a think tank on WhatsApp, what we need to be talking about is proposals. Always staying ready so that we don't have to get ready, right? We need to have the proposals at the ready. We need to have ideas, but ideas are not enough. We need we need to make inroads with, political forces or create political forces of our own. So we have to have these things in place. If there's an election in 2020, you got to start putting in that work from 2015. You have to have those things on the ready from beforehand. In fact, if we had things on the ready before an Obama came along, he actually might not have been president. Because if we had things on the ready as a people, policies and policy proposals, and he showed early on that he wasn't in line with it, we might have had his ass up out of there. And had to tough it out with someone else instead. So we have to be ready. I'm going to pause here for a quick station break. And on the other side, I want to talk about what's really needed in any think tank, but what we really need in the Bitter Medicine podcast think tank, or what I would like to see. Okay, so stay tuned.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine podcast. On today's show, we are discussing the need for think tanks in the black community. I started off by playing a clip from Dr. Claud Anderson. As you know, Dr. Claud Anderson is the author of Powernomics, probably his most notable book to date. And Dr. Claud Anderson, you've seen him in different forms of media talking about his 5 levels to control. And we played that clip earlier. And before Dr. Claud Anderson got into those 5 levels to control, he talked about the need for community, trust, and accountability. And to me, those things are the core things that you need in a black, African-centered think tank. Some of the things that you would need in addition to that in a think tank, you're going to need board members. And I know as soon as people hear board members, they're thinking, real stuffy, real corporate type stuff. No, we're not talking about anything stuffy and corporate. In fact, that's not really the African way necessarily of doing things. But we do need people who could bring, management ideas, who could bring communication, who could bring some fundraising expertise. We really need people with expertise in these African-centered black think tanks. The next group we need inside these think tanks are researchers, people who are skilled in the art of research. So a lot of you writers fit that mold, or you scientists, you engineers. You came up doing research in your professions. We need folks like you who know how to do the research, who know how to present the statistics, who know how to analyze the numbers and break it down into palatable pieces or palatable chunks that everyone, our folks, could understand. We also need funders. We need people. We don't necessarily need millionaires, because when you have 1 or 2 people who are millionaires funding you, then you have to do what they say. You have to speak about topics they want you to speak about. That most times helps them out becoming even richer. You look at the Black Lives Matter movement. Black Lives Matter takes on a lot of that intersectionality nonsense that they try to push on black folks. Takes on a lot of that blacks and the LGBTQRSTUV movement. Why? Because the so-called founders are queer. some of the most notable faces in the Black Lives Matter movement are queer. And so they have a Jewish guy, George Soros, who's funding them. Big Hillary Clinton person who's funding them. And by the way, since Hillary lost the election, I haven't heard that much from Black Lives Matter. Because that was all a thing to kind of help usher her in there too. Get the black vote. Okay? So we need funders, but you don't have to have a bunch of multimillionaires funding you. That's what white folks do. For us, we just need people who are willing to put up something. I know that's difficult in the black community because we don't have a lot of disposable income. Or is that really true? When I see the amount of Negroes camping out for an iPhone, the amount of Negroes camping out for the latest Jordans, is it really true that we don't have a lot of disposable income? We can argue that. But essentially what we need is for funding. We need people who can fund, who are black first. And so they're funding from the standpoint of being black first and wanting to see black excellence occur. And then lastly, what's needed from a African-centered black think tank, we need to publish what we find. We need to publish what we find. And this goes to something Dr. Claud Anderson says in the clip that we played earlier. Take a listen to this, and then I'll flesh this out a little further.
What they're doing wrong. The same thing in business. Producers will be the people survive. Right now, black folk are zero producers and 100% consumers. You're going to get totally wiped out in this country and wiped off the face of the earth under globalization if you don't learn how to produce vertically. You produce something at the bottom level, then you go up and you have other blacks come in over you. If I'm producing fish, 1 million pounds of fish a year, I want blacks to come in at warehouse, wholesale, distributor, then retail. I want to see some black lobster restaurants in the country. And you build, and at about 2 more minutes I got. Now, and you build these vertical orders based on your competitive advantages. Build your businesses where you have a competitive advantage. What are your competitive advantages, black folk? Always build your business where you dominate in population or you dominate in spending patterns. I built the seafood factories. Why? Because blacks eat 3 to 4 times more seafood than whites, and you spend $9 for every $1 whites spend. You should be controlling the seafood industry. Do the same thing with leather. You do the same thing with your hair. Right now, blacks are the only people got a certain quality of hair, and yet the Koreans are controlling black hair care in America. And you watch you build these businesses like the difference between Detroit and Chinatown. You got it in Chinatown in New York. In Chinatown, New York, they got about a little less than 300,000 Chinese there. And in Detroit, you had almost 1 million blacks. I looked at the two and compared them. In Chinatown, they had 35 banks, 35 Asian banks. In Detroit, they got 2 black banks, and that's owned by the same one. How is it that almost 1 million people don't have 2 banks and 300,000 will have 35 banks? I looked at the number of restaurants. The Asians had almost 400-something restaurants in New York. Black folk in Detroit had 3. I looked at and I said, how do these Asians producing so well and have so much? And Asians have the highest median family income in America. Here's what they do in conclusion. They build around their advantage. What is it that Asians eat the most of? They eat noodles. I went and found something like about 100 and some noodle factories in New York where they produce their own noodles. Now, once they produce the noodles, what do you put on the noodles? They put a sauce on the noodles. I found about another 60 or 70 companies that produce the sauce to go on the noodles. And I said, what else they producing? Then I found that they had, I don't know how many, 35 or 40 companies that make the little fortune cookies. They take care of their own people. That's why you'll never see Asians, Arabs, Hispanic, or American Indians out marching for integration or for social civil rights. They don't do it. They build businesses.
Keep that in mind what he just said just now. They ain't marching and doing all this kind of stuff. They build businesses and stuff. But the real point of why I played that to as a part of my current part of the discussion is for you to know what to do with your businesses, you have to have facts, or you have to have evidence first. So the think tank is supposed to research the way blacks live. put those numbers together, and those numbers can then be used by entrepreneurs, by business people in the community, by the community as a whole. And you can now target the areas of how you live. You could base things on how you innately live. And that's why you have to have think tanks. And that's what Dr. Anderson isn't explicitly saying. The think tank does the research, publishes the research, and you could use that research to start organizing the community. You want more blacks to be business people, but black folks don't know what kind of business they should start. Well, let's go to the data that the black think tanks, the African-centered think tanks, have put together. Oh, we eat a lot of seafood. Then let's build business around seafood industry. We wear a lot of leather. Well, let's build around leather. We do a lot with our hair. Let's build around that type of stuff. And you know, the hair care stuff, that's an obvious one. We've been known, you know, anecdotally how much money is spent by our women alone on hair care products. People don't talk about it. Black guys are spending some money too, getting waves and all this kind of shit. So, you know, it's out there. And we have to research ourselves, understand ourselves, because I'm going to tell you something today. White folks understand you. They study you. There's a video on YouTube, you could look it up, called How to Sell to the Negro. They've been studying you for a long time. I even wager to say that they have think tanks dedicated to you and how to exploit you. But we need to build our own think tanks. In fact, there are 1,777 think tanks in the USA. More than half of that number was founded since 1991. There are very low numbers of black think tanks in the USA. You'll find some black think tanks in Africa. Kwame Nkrumah had a popular think tank at one time. There's several others. But just in the US here, where we are, very low numbers of black think tanks. The most prominent black think tank is the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. The Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies focuses on the future of work, entrepreneurship, and the use of technology to improve quality of life. They also work to increase diversity among Congress. My issue with this center is that it doesn't explicitly address black folks. It's just known to be a black think tank. When you go to its website, you'll notice that there's not much really going on the website. A lot of photo shoots. Seems yearly they do a photo shoot with a diverse group of people. But in my research, I came to understand that they're not well funded. And remember, I listed 4 things needed by a think tank. You need board members for management, communications, fundraising, etc. You need researchers. You need people to fund it. You need funders. And you need to publish. And it seems like this one, that's the most notable black think tank, is not well funded. So that probably is reflected in the website where I see nothing much going on. Now, I'm not sure why that is, but it's probably because they work from a diversity standpoint as opposed to a black first standpoint. You see, we'll always fail. We will always fail ultimately when we start working on this multiculturalism, diversity, intersectionality stuff. We will always fail. That diversity stuff, that's the kind of shit that gets you infiltrated and destroyed. That's how the Black Panthers had a Japanese guy who was an informant. Of course he was. What the fuck else was the Japanese guy doing there? Wasn't no sushi rolls, no calamari. No, I'm just bullshitting right now. But what was he doing there? So of course he was one of the informants against you. So we have to deal with these low numbers of black think tanks. And again, I'm putting out there, the Bitter Medicine podcast has the Bitter Medicine think tank on WhatsApp. If you want to be a part of it, shoot us an email at bitter.medicine.podcast@gmail.com. Let us know what expertise you have, what you would like to do, and we will send you the link so that you could connect with us on mobile. But when we talk about the needs of a black think tank, like I said, board members, researchers, funders, and the need to publish what you find, we got to get our black colleges and universities to play a role in the research. When I did the show about STEM subjects and black society, and how we need to focus more on pushing our kids into the STEM fields, have more representation in STEM fields, as opposed to pushing our kids into music and entertainment and basketball and all that stuff, which Dr. Claud Anderson talked about in that clip. We have a kind of wrong relationship with a ball. Somebody commented and said that we do have to recognize where we need to really target when we're talking about getting STEM people on the black first thinking and dedicating their expertise to the black community. We got to go to these historically black colleges and universities. We have to rope them in. And I have to question, what are the historically black colleges and universities really doing? As the commenter pointed out, he graduated from an HBCU that had about 300 graduating engineers, all black. So what was the school doing in the tenure of those students who were graduating, 300 engineers in one graduation? What were you doing in those students, college life, that you didn't get them on code, so to speak, black first, revolutionary, to use their intelligence towards building up the black community? And we've talked about this in a past podcast as well. The significant amount of brain drain that occurs in black society globally. We have all these intelligent men and women in all of these pertinent subject areas that we cannot use as a resource because their talents are being used by Europeans, European countries, European people. We've got to get through to these black colleges and universities and have them be a part of these think tanks as well. Because those folks who came out of those institutions, they can be the researchers. They're the ones who could look at all the data, break it down. And so when you start talking about black businesses and creating black business and creating an economy, you can actually go to evidence, to facts, not something that we all kind of think, but to stuff that's in the data. Our black businesses, our black entrepreneurs should be able to request information from our think tanks to assist in marketing and advocating for the organization. The data will allow us to make more informed decisions. As my brethren Oni from, let me say this right this week, from the Pro-Black Perspective podcast, as he likes to say, you need black solutions for a black problem. The data, the black data, will help us with the black solution. So, to me, that's the blueprint to a lot of what we talk about here on this show, to a lot about what Dr. Claud Anderson was talking about. He alludes to it, but he doesn't spell this part out. We have to come together in groups. We have to have our finest. And I'm not talking about people who are college educated necessarily. I'm talking about we need our artists, we need our writers, we need our entertainers, we need representation from all facets of black life to be a part of these think tanks, to fund it, to sponsor it. We need to get the actual intellectuals, those who are college educated or those who know their way around statistics, to crunch the data down and show us with this fact-based evidence, show us what we need to do next. I'm telling you, it's in the numbers, and Europeans know it. When you walk into a store, say a department store, and a white person who works for that store greets you, they already have a game plan on how to deal with you. Because their managers, their people have informed them how to deal with a black person who walks into their store, who seems like they're in the store to buy something. They know how to deal with you. Go look up on YouTube the short documentary, How to Sell to the Negro. They have you down to a literal science. But you don't have yourself down to a science. For example, until I heard Dr. Anderson say that about seafood, I didn't know black folks were the biggest consumers of seafood. Being Caribbean, I know Caribbean folks, and where I'm from, people are down with eating from the sea. But I didn't know in America, with black Americans, Africans, Caribbeans, etc., I didn't know that seafood was that big. That we spend $9 for every $1 white spend on seafood. I did not know that. But that's where you have to have the research. You have to have, as I mentioned in previous segments, you have to have those proposals ready to go. So when you start talking about elections and voting and all this stuff, you need to know yourself. You need to know the facts about you. You need to know what the numbers say about you and be able to leverage that to anyone who wants your vote. Instead, we vote on a nice smile, or we vote on who could speak the best, or who endorsed this person. And to show you the science, they have people endorsing people, and they know the numbers. They know what an endorsement from X person is going to do for Y person. You know, funny enough, on this show, we tend to bring up Carter G. Woodson, and a part of that is because Carter G. Woodson was one of the first people I really read on my journey. Maybe Marcus Garvey before him, but Carter G. Woodson, I really kind of studied what he talked about, the miseducation, because I saw the miseducation in myself and in people around me at the time. And Carter G. Woodson, in a sense, had a think tank. In fact, if you go back to my last podcast, you know I did a show with Natasha X. And Natasha X has a new blog post on her blog site called Black History Month, A History and Reflection. And she talks about, in fact, I'm going to read the first paragraph. She says, in 1915, Carter G. Woodson attended a national celebration of the 50th anniversary of emancipation sponsored by the state of Illinois. There he was inspired to create an organization to promote the scientific study of black life and history. He, A.L. Jackson, and 3 others formed the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, known as ASNLH. In fact, the second paragraph goes, Woodson wanted to publish the scientific history and achievements of Africans. The scientific history and achievements of Africans, in hopes of transforming race relations by dispelling the widespread falsehoods about the achievements of Africans and peoples of African descent. In 1916, he established the Journal of Negro History, which published information on African history and achievements. So you see, Carter G. Woodson understood that you needed to promote the scientific study of black life and even black history. And in fact, we're now in Black History Month, and Carter G. Woodson was the gentleman who created Black History Week, which later turned into Black History Month. But the Association for the Study of African American Life and History is the oldest and largest historical society established for the promotion of African American history. Carter G. Woodson understood that you have to look at things scientifically. You have to have the numbers and make sense of the numbers. And then use those numbers, proliferate the information. Carter G. Woodson had two newspapers back in the day where they published, a lot of stuff about black history and, kind of a scientific approach of black African history. And we need to do something like that now. We're more so in a digital age, so newspapers aren't as poppin' as they used to be. But we're in an age where we could disseminate information very quickly. We have websites, we have blogs. The Bitter Medicine Podcast has its own blog site called www.bittermedicineblogs.com. If you want to be a blogger, you should contact us again at the email that we mentioned before, bitter.medicine.podcast@gmail.com. We need folks like you. We need the writers. We need the filmmakers. We just as much as we need the engineers, the doctors, the lawyers. We need everyone who has a black consciousness, who's black first, who understands what's at stake. We are at war. The people warring against us, they study us. They have us down to a science. When Dylan Roof killed those 9 black folks in a church, later on it came out that the reason why he went to a church, now this didn't take any deep analysis on his part, but the reason why he went to a black church is because he knew there were soft targets. He knew a bunch of Negroes in a church really ain't gonna be packing no heat. He could have picked them off easy. He knew that if he went into a projects, a hood, a ghetto, probably wouldn't work. At least not to the extent of 9 people. They know you. They study you. Shouldn't you study yourself? I'm going to pause here for a quick station ID. And then on the other side, I'm going to wrap up this show.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. As I prepare to wrap this up, this show, again, is about think tanks, which is a community of social engineers, idea brokers. We need think tanks, and we need its influencers, because when you take the evidence-based discussions of influencers, you can mobilize their expertise, and you could actually lead to some policy changes. And by policy changes, we're not necessarily talking about governmental policy changes. We're just talking about the policies that we hold in our community, also known as code. We could change the codes that we live by in our community. And if we could do those things, we could change the economy in our community. And like Dr. Claud Anderson talks about the 5 levels of control, we can take our economy and we can move on up to improving our standing, not only economically, but in terms of the eyes of the media, in terms of our education. We can change everything that's going on with us. But we need you. We need each other. We have to start building these black think tanks, and not on some intersectionality, open arm policy bullshit. We need to be unapologetically black, unapologetically African, with African-centered and black-minded think tanks that scientifically breaks down black life, not only locally but globally around the world. And then we need to share that information amongst ourselves and build off of that information to build said economy, said education. So I'm making a personal call to anyone who's listening to this. Go to our social media, look on the walls, you will find the link to our WhatsApp group. I only want people in this WhatsApp think tank group who are about putting in work, who are so about putting in work, they will seek out this link to join this think tank that we have going on. That's when you know someone's really about it. They'll put in the time, put in the work, just to find the link, just to be involved. So I'm putting this out there to you guys. If you're hearing this and you're interested in joining a think tank like what I have been discussing to you, head over to our social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Look for the link. If you can't find it, by all means, email us at bitter.medicine.podcast@gmail.com and request a link. Let us know a little bit about you, what are your expertise, etc., so that we can introduce you to the others who are already in the think tank presently. If you're affiliated with a historically black college or university, we need you to be involved with this think tank as well, because we can't have a situation where we have 300 engineers from one historically black college or university graduating, and we don't see the evidence of 300 engineers just from this one school in our community. We don't see any building. We don't see anything focused on building the black community in the numbers that we're hearing that black students are graduating as builders from historically black colleges and universities. If you're an alumni of one of these schools, we need you. If you're an engineer, doctor, mathematician, you're an artist, you're even an actor, an actress, whatever you are, if you're black first, black-minded, please seek us out, join our group, and let's build. Let's build. Let's build on the idea that we want to put out data. We want to scientifically break down our communities, what are our habits, what are our flaws, what's good about us, what's bad about us, where do we spend our dollars the most. Let's do that. Let's start putting together some proposals. Let's start putting together statistics so that our black entrepreneurs, our black businessmen, the community at large, can access those numbers and we can make informed decisions about what to do next. But we can't make decisions off of what white folks give us. They're at war with us. They're going to misinform and miseducate you anytime they can. So please join us in the Bitter Medicine podcast think tank on WhatsApp. Search for the link on our social media sites, or if you want to, send us an email. Tell us who you are, what you do, what your interests are, and we'll reply with the link. Also, guys, before I go, I just want to thank everyone who has donated to our GoFundMe. We have a GoFundMe up. You can find the link on our social media site, so you could go to GoFundMe and search the Bitter Medicine Podcast. We are trying to raise funds between now and the middle of June to be able to purchase better, more efficient podcasting equipment, as well as to market this podcast so that it receives more visibility, because we do believe that we have something to say, and we know that we are out here trying to put in the work. So if you can help us with that, just for the price of a cup of coffee even, donate today, help us reach our goal so we can build this platform a little bit better. Also, remember that we're on the KWAZ Radio Podcast Network, and we have a sister show on that network. Our sister show is the Pro-Black Perspective with its host, Onitase. Onitase did a show recently that's a very interesting show talking about the need for black community centers. And he did one today that's about, our black heroes, considering that it's, the beginning of Black History Month. You should check those out. If you or someone you know is very opinionated on black matters, and you're thinking about blogging or vlogging or doing a podcast, do it with KWAZ Radio. You can email them at kwaz.radio@gmail.com. Let them know what your idea is, and you can work out the details with them over there. I want to thank you guys for listening, your comments and your support, your retweets, your shares, your likes. That motivates us to keep doing this, to keep talking to you weekly. So I appreciate you. I thank you. And if you have a black business and you want a free business shout out, please contact us with the information so we can give you a shout out. Guys, it's been great talking to you today. Look forward to my next podcast later this week. Until then, this has been the Bitter Medicine Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.